Today on the show, the episode ended like 12 years ago, but for some reason, we're back to ruin your life and, naturally, join you in bed.
Yeah, we are, dear listener.
Just keep your headphones in. Okay, that's all we ask.
Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name's Abu.
My name is Leo.
And Leo, we're back to talk about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Is really? I thought we were talking about Jason Momoa.
Oh, there seems to be a mix-up because I'm looking at the script and it says Baron Vladimir Harkonnen at the top.
You know, it happens. It happens to the best of us. You are right. We are talking about Baron Vladimir Harkonnen again. This is part 2, a 2-part journey. In part, thanks to a listener email from Jason Podsinik, who recommended we talk about the Baron. Mm-hmm. And here we are.
Here we are indeed. Jason, thank you so much for the fantastic episode idea. Now, before we get into today's episode, let's take care of some housekeeping because we need to warn you about spoilers today.
Indeed.
In our conversation over the course of this episode, we will be talking about events all the way through the end of Children of Dune.
Yep.
So if you have not read to the very last page of that third book in the Dune saga, be warned. We will be talking about some late game things from that book.
Yeah. Like, for real. Like, yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. Luckily, we do have a book club that we've been kind of making our way through. So check it out. Need I recommend you read Children of Dune? It's a great book. But read it along with us. And when you're done with the book, got to that last page, you can come back and listen to this episode.
Indeed.
It'll be here.
Now, a reminder that the best way to support this show is to become a patron at patreon.com/GomJabbar.
Yep.
You'll get ad-free episodes. You'll get access to those aforementioned book club episodes months in advance.
Yep.
Plus, you'll get fun bonus clips and bloopers that you can't find anywhere else. Only for your sweet, sweet patron ears.
The sweetest of ears.
We also have an exclusive Discord for our patrons where you can come hang out with Leo and I, interact and chat with us directly, and of course, get to know everyone else in our wonderful, geeky little community. Everyone's real hot on the Dune memes these days.
It's true. Especially with that game coming out. Oh, it looks so good.
Yes. Ooh, the new game.
We want to, as always, shout out our Kwisatz Haderach level member, Case Aiken.
Yes.
My lord, Case Aiken. If our captain of the guard was mysteriously killed by a poisoned tooth, I'd promote you immediately to captain of the guard, but not because you're addicted to Samuda, because you're freaking awesome. Thanks, dude.
Indeed.
We appreciate the support.
We do. Thank you so much. And another way to support the show is to check out our merchandise store on GomJabbarShop.com.
Yeah.
Our store is full of Dune-themed art and apparel and a mug and a tote bag and so much more. So go check all of that stuff out. Once again, that's GomJabbarShop.com, a wonderful way to help support the show.
It's true. Finally, we love to hear from you. So send us an email. Say hi. GomJabbarPodcast@gmail.com. You could be like Jason Podsinik. You could help us decide our next episode topic. Or you could just say hello. Send us pictures of your pets.
Yes.
Either way, we love to hear from you. Drop us a line anytime.
Indeed. Now, what are we getting into today?
Sure.
Well, in part 1 of our Baron deep dive, we discussed Vladimir Harkonnen's childhood.
Right.
We talked about that very fateful Harkonnen state banquet where everything changed and our boy rose to power.
Yeah.
That's going to come up again a lot today as well. And, of course, we touched on his early career as the Baron of House Harkonnen. All of the events basically leading up to Dune and the first half of the Dune book.
Right.
So today, in part 2, we will be diving into a spoiler-filled discussion of the rest of his life. We'll spend the first half of the episode focusing mainly on the final couple of years of his life in Dune and his untimely death at the hands of a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
And then in the second half of the episode, we'll talk about his reappearance in Children of Dune within that same 4-year-old's mind.
Right.
It's complicated.
Like any other biography.
Twists and turns.
Twists and turns. Before all of that, we're going to take a quick break. So hang out, stick around. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's do it. Let's now break down the rest of the Baron's life and talk about some of the events of Dune.
Right.
A quick refresher on some of the things that we touched on in part 1.
Sure.
Let's quickly go over some of the key characteristics that defined the first 80 years of the Baron's life. A lot of the things that we talked about back in part 1.
Right.
And this also seems like an apt time to mention, if you haven't listened to part 1 and you're listening straight to this like a maniac, go listen to part 1. A lot of today's discussion builds on what we've already discussed.
Right. So to start off, recall he was brilliant, an incredibly sharp young man. He won Cheops tournaments, just like chess. He was charismatic, noted for an attention to interpersonal details, and exceedingly curious and good at learning whatever he set his mind to. His teachers were like, dang, this kid frickin' rules.
Yeah.
He also watched his father murdered.
Oh, no.
I know. He loved his dad, too. He had like one of the only healthy parent-child relationships in all of Dune.
Yeah.
Other than Leto and Paul. But he watched his father get murdered by his older brother, Raskin.
Yikes.
Yeah. And then murdered his own mother that same night. What an eventful party that was. And immediately began rule as just a calculated, cruel, merciless dude. At the young age of 20, he was already mass executing people he suspected of conflicting loyalty.
My God.
It's nuts. And also subjecting his like house guard to deep psychological torture to make sure they're loyal.
Right.
But also, he then spent like 60 years meticulously collecting imperial power, allying himself with smaller houses, and doing things that genuinely, I think, would require that kind of interpersonal savvy.
Yeah.
All while positioning himself to be in a favorable standing to the emperor with this eventual stretch goal. He's like trying to GoFundMe his bid for like being a great house. He's like, and stretch goal, emperor. I'm going to be emperor.
Right.
It's going to go great.
Ambitious.
Very ambitious.
Like many a GoFundMe out there.
Yeah. And almost as murderous.
Now, all of that having been said, in the second half of Dune, what we're going to focus on today, we start to actually see the other side of the coin.
Sure.
We know he's a shrewd politician. We know he's cunning. We know he's brilliant. We know he's a great singer. The guy crushes karaoke night.
Yo, true.
But here, in the latter half of the Dune book, we start to see a side of him we haven't yet. His paranoid side, his cowardly side, and, this is maybe the most damning one, his ignorant side.
Yeah.
All of these negative qualities in him that have been there his whole life, but really come out into the spotlight in the second half of the book.
Yeah.
I mean, his life sort of wraps up in this final face-off with Shaddam at the end of the book, right? And by this point in his life, he's so off his game that this 4-year-old, Alia, calls him out. This quote is absolutely savage.
Yeah.
She says, quote, "He doesn't appear much, does he? One frightened old fat man too weak to support his own flesh without the help of suspensors." End quote.
Oof. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a downgrade for the man that we talked about in part 1. It's a tough look.
Yeah, when the roast of Baron Harkonnen starts with a 4-year-old, who's just calling out what she sees, not even like thinking that much. She's like, wow, he's like scared and old. Ugh. He's like thicker, heavier boy, weak.
Yeah.
I'm a child. He's like, fuck. That sucks.
Right. Not a great look for our guy, the Baron.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to explore that more today. We wanted to talk about some choice scenes from the first book and explore some of these qualities that make an appearance.
Yeah. And I'll say, even writing out this episode, I did find myself accidentally rereading big chunks of Dune because it'd be like, okay, this is a relevant chapter. And then 3 chapters later, I'm like, what am I doing? Oops.
How much of Dune can we recite from memory?
It's getting up there. That being said, I encourage you, if you listen to that first episode, go back and reread some of his chapters, because really, Baron Harkonnen's such an interesting character with some of those qualities in mind. And we'll talk about, as you said, a couple of key moments in today's episode to really kind of drive home that point.
For sure. Let's start by talking about the Baron's cowardice.
Sure.
This side of him that we start to see in the latter half of the book. His life by this point is sort of spiraling, right?
Right.
He's lost Piter. He successfully took down House Atreides, but never really confirmed whether Paul and his mother were killed.
Right.
It was a well-executed plan, but it was not a perfectly executed plan. And now he's out here dealing with this like young heir-to-be who's trying to kill him and stuff. So the Baron's juggling a lot of balls in the second half of the book.
Right.
And from the first day he took power, after literally committing matricide, he has put on this air of fearlessness.
Right.
I am the Baron Harkonnen. I demand loyalty. I am fearless.
Right.
And we see how that starts to break down, particularly in a scene where he's faced with the Emperor's whims.
Right. Yeah.
Through our boy, Count Fenring.
Right. Although he's caught off guard a few times by twists and turns, it's really seriously at Fade's 17th birthday celebration that we see exactly what you're talking about. Like this idea of, oh, fuck, I have no power in this situation, right?
Yeah.
Now, our boy, Count Fenring, classy lad that we love dearly, very clearly makes him uncomfortable. And it makes sense. He's a hyper dangerous man. Like he's a tremendously dangerous person.
Yeah.
But also, what he says to the Emperor could directly jeopardize every single day of Vladimir's ruling of House Harkonnen, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's been spending his whole life trying to make House Harkonnen in a good position to take the Imperial throne. And here's Fenring like, yo, I could say a word to Shaddam and he would discredit you, like in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So Vladimir's feeling this, right? Baron Harkonnen's feeling this, and he's fluctuating in this scene between being very careful and guarded. You know, a lot of his thoughts are like, what is he thinking? What is he saying? What is he trying to do? What is he insinuating? You know, spiraling, as you said.
Right.
And literally outright sweating and just like trying his best to force smiles and maintain this charade of, no, like I'm in control, and clearly failing.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to point out here, especially with the first episode down, and we talked about how charismatic he was and how he negotiated all these big deals. And like, clearly this is a dude who should be comfortable in a like high stakes conversation. It's really profound how uncomfortable Fenring is making him in that very like show don't tell way, right? We might not get a sentence that says Baron Vladimir Harkonnen was very uncomfortable with Fenring, but every other sentence is like, he rasped, he literally fucking stumbles at one point.
Right.
He's falling apart. It's embarrassing.
Exactly. And you're so right that this is profound, because you have to remember the Baron has like over 50 years of being Baron under his belt at this point.
Yeah.
Like you're telling me this lifelong politician has never been in a tense conversation with someone. The fact that he's on his back foot this entire time with Fenring shows us how truly afraid he is.
Yeah.
of what Fenring is saying, of the veiled threats and somewhat outright threats that Fenring is throwing at him.
Right.
You're so right. It's really profound stuff. I mean, one of these threats that Fenring is tossing at the Baron is about the future of House Harkonnen itself.
Yeah.
Fenring mentions how perhaps he should report the Baron for some sort of crime against Imperium, something he calls process verbal. And again, in his way, Fenring is like trying to play this off as a joke, but like you said, the Baron literally stumbles in his response. He's so caught off by this.
Yeah.
And what Fenring is basically implying here is that the Emperor hasn't officially approved of Feyd-Rautha as the heir to House Harkonnen, so Vladimir can't go around flaunting Feyd as his heir.
Right.
As the next head of House Harkonnen until the Emperor approves it. And of course, the veiled threat underneath that is, Baron, if you fuck with us, we won't approve Feyd-Rautha as the next Baron of House Harkonnen.
Yeah. And my guy, you basically don't have kids.
Yeah.
In an empire defined by like fathers and sons, right? Shaddam desperately himself trying to have a son, and his Bene Gesserit wife being like, nope, get fucked, idiot.
That's a different kind of cock block, but yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. And it's such a powerful scene. I mean, all of the Baron's confidence, as we know, comes from this playbook of the Imperium. Be ruthless, be cunning, be brash, be bold. And the Baron embodies all of that. He's embodied all of that his whole life. That's what he's been taught.
Right.
And it's really fascinating to see that playbook fail him here. In the face of Fenring's threats, in the face of the Emperor's whims, being ruthless, cunning, brash, and bold
Right.
may be backfiring on him and maybe throwing a huge wrench in all his plans.
Yeah, it's true. I'll also say, reviewing this scene where they're talking, I somehow missed this like 3 times.
This is so good.
There's this quote from this chapter of Dune by Frank Herbert, if you've heard of it. This is the Baron. Quote, "He looked up at the new talismans flanking the exit to his hall, the mounted bull's head, and the oil painting of the old Duke Atreides, the late Duke Leto's father." End quote.
Holy shit.
My God.
Oh
what?
My God.
How did I miss that? Baron Harkonnen straight up took the fucking bowl from the dining hall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of Arakeen Palace and the like oil painting of the old Duke. He's like, you know what? I like that too. I like that one too. What does it mean? Who's to say? It's great.
Amazing. What a flex. What a flex.
What a flex, but also a very calculated thing, right? He's invited Houses Minor to this party.
Yeah.
And if he's going around going, hey, guess who fucking killed House Atreides? I'll give you a hint. Look above the door. What is that? A bull? Hell yeah, it is.
That ain't my grandpappy.
That ain't my grandpappy that got killed by that bull right there. Yeah. Absolute incredible flex. Insane.
Truly.
So bold.
All right. Let's talk about another aspect of the Baron that reveals itself to us at this point in the story.
Sure.
His paranoia.
Yeah. Yep.
This is so fascinating. There's a lot to dig into here because it ties so much to his past and the way he rose to power. But it also stands in stark contrast to someone like Paul, to someone like Leto of House Atreides, being able to fully trust the people that work for them, right? Loyalty is such a cornerstone of Atreides' rule. And people like Duncan Idaho, Gurney Halleck, Stilgar are loyal to Paul to their deaths.
Yeah, it's true.
That is not true for the Baron. The Baron is basically surrounded by people he cannot trust with anything. Can't tell them a single secret. Loose lips all over the place.
So many loose lips. Sometimes he's into it. This time he's not. It's true.
Ew.
I know. Crippling to have no one to trust ever in your life forever. It's part of his downfall, and 100% it's happening here. So the tooth event happens. The tooth event happens, and needing a new captain of the guard, Baron locks onto this Nefud guy, but also like almost exclusively because he knows the man's vices, right?
Yeah.
Here's the quote. Quote, "The Baron stared at the approaching man, recalling the name. Nefud. Iakin Nefud. Guard Corporal. Nefud was addicted to Samuda, the drug-music combination that played itself in the deepest consciousness. A useful item of information, that." End quote. And it strikes me, that the Baron's first fucking thought of this guy comes up being helpful, and Baron's like, thought number one, what's this guy's name? Cool.
Incredible.
Nice. Second thought, what's he addicted to? What was
Yeah.
it? I know what everyone's addicted to. What's this guy's thing? Oh, this guy's Samuda, right? He likes that timeless, sustained ecstasy. So literally, his second thought in this moment is, how can I control this person? Like, how can I manipulate them? And you can imagine that this comes from this lifetime of politics and going back to that trauma of his brother murdering his father.
Yeah.
And then having to himself kill his mother, who had these desires to take over House Harkonnen. I mean, what's the best way to not get stabbed in the back? Control everybody around you so that you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
And that is his strategy, and clearly it doesn't super work, although he does get stabbed in the hand eventually, not the back. So 1 point to Baron, I guess. We also see this fail in the form of Thufir Hawat, right?
Right.
Where Baron believes Thufir would choose to betray Paul Atreides over, like, dying painfully to poison.
Yeah.
And he's wrong. He's fucking wrong, because he doesn't understand loyalty, because he's never felt it or experienced it in any way other than through fear and power.
Right. And to me, that also vindicates House Atreides.
Yeah.
They bet on the loyalty of their employees, servants, household, whatever. And Baron Harkonnen, his bet is on control, and control through manipulation, more specifically.
Yeah.
And we can see for ourselves who wins out in the end there, especially in that example of Thufir.
Yeah. Literally, Paul is like, yo, Thufir, you want to kill me? I'm down. You can. Totally go for it.
Here's a knife. It's
Thufir's
poison
like,
tipped.
what? No. It's super fucking bold.
Yeah.
Yo,
So
you
good.
want to?
So good.
Fucking go for it, dude. Treat yourself. You deserve it, dude. Long career.
Treat yourself. It's part of your retirement package.
Thufir's like, you're bringing weird energy into this conversation. I'm just
Right.
going to die quietly, all right?
Right. Loyalty through the act of being extremely weird. Now, the Baron's paranoia and this obsession with control isn't just limited to random guard captains whose names he can barely remember.
Right.
These feelings extend to literally his own flesh and blood.
Yeah, of course.
We actually see this on full display later in the book when Fade Rotha, his heir apparent,
Yeah.
attempts to assassinate Vladimir Harkonnen using the slave boy with the hidden needle.
Right.
So let's explore that scene a little bit, because it's worth getting into and drawing some parallels to what we now know about the Baron's history and his personality and these traits.
I do love quickly that when he storms in to the guard quarter or whatever, and he's like, where's Fade? And Fade shows up and he's like, oh, I was playing Cheops with the slave master.
Yeah.
Baron, who's like, again, was a tournament winning Cheops player, is like, yeah, you win? And Fade is like, yeah. And Baron's like, cool. Hey, Nefud, kill the slave master. I don't want fucking losers in House Harkonnen.
Hilarious.
The actual quote is, quote, we cannot have such inept chess players in our employ.
Oh my God. Savage.
Meanwhile, every person who overhears this quietly reminds themselves, like, okay, I got to get back to studying Cheops so that I don't get murdered for sucking at chess. Okay. Note to self.
Right.
I also appreciate that immediately after that, the two guards that Fade sends to take care of the slave boy's body, Baron Harkonnen very quickly tells Nefud, also kill them. I don't like how they were carrying that body. But of course, like, that hilarious sarcasm aside, he's not sure of their total loyalty to him anymore, and very much like publicly executing anyone sympathetic to House Cerebella after his mother's betrayal of his father.
Yeah.
This is very much in that same tone of, I'm not sure about your loyalty and your reliability, so I'm going to kill you.
So true. Again, we see these parallels across his life like that.
Yeah.
And there's a couple more we're going to point out too.
Right.
Also, I think Netflix is making a documentary about him, right? The Baron's Gambit.
Baron's Gambit. Yeah. You know, I think that has to happen now. That would be superb. The woman from Queen's Gambit finishes her final chess match, and she's like, okay, cool. And then, you have one more opponent. It's like, oh, shit. Is that Stellan Skarsgård?
Oh, no.
Oh, no. He floats in, cuts off her head with a pawn.
That would be one hell of a twist. Netflix, hire us.
Directed by M. Night Shyamalan.
All right, so let's talk about this attempted assassination of the Baron.
Yeah.
Of course, the thing that immediately comes to mind is how undeniably poetic it is that one of Vladimir's family members is attempting to kill him with a poison needle.
Right.
Because, again, think back to that fateful banquet.
Yeah.
This reeks of a Raskin meeting Chardon Cleese's poison needle as betrayals are flying left and right, in addition to chicken wings or whatever was at the banquet. But at this point in his life, decades later, the Baron has learned his lesson because, quote, he kept his body shield turned to maximum, stopped facing his nephew, end quote.
Yeah.
He is not about to be caught off guard like his father was.
Yeah.
That banquet has clearly taught him some lessons. And I think the huge takeaway for him has been something we've kind of been getting at, this paranoia about everyone around him, including family. To the Baron, anyone can be an enemy, even your own flesh and blood, even your own nephew, even your own brother, your mother.
Right. I had the stretchiest of thoughts just now. So, tinfoil hats on, everybody, please.
Yeah.
Gom Jabbar, poison needle, human test, right? Are you or are you not human?
Right.
If Baron had leaned into his animalistic urges and just proceeded with trying to have sex with the boy, he would have died.
Yeah.
So he survives this poison needle ordeal because rather than succumb to fleshly pleasures, he eliminated this threat through control, presumably.
Wow.
Or some kind of stretch of verbiage. That being said, the difference, of course, between Baron Harkonnen and one of the other capital H humans, he only survived because of Thufir Hawat's warning.
Right.
So it's only through use of a mentat that he survived otherwise a human test that he probably would have failed.
That is such a great point.
Maybe. Okay, you can take off your tinfoil hats now.
Here's the thing, Leo. Mine was never on.
Mine never came off.
Oh, shit.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And again, parallels what happened at the banquet because Mentat Chardon Cleese fucking killed a Raskin and saved the Baron's life because the Baron was obviously target number 2 in the betrayal by his brother and his mother. And here, once again, the Fear Hawat plays a part. A Mentat plays a part in saving his life.
Right.
We continue to see these echoes throughout the Baron's life. It also kind of highlights a little bit how much that trauma is making him act kind of like an idiot. I mean, he's spending his whole life just looking over his shoulder. That doesn't strike me as the young 20-year-old Baron who took power and who, you know, put his fucking hashtag fear and power, hashtag power and fear on every t-shirt.
Yeah.
Like, this guy has definitely not gone to therapy, as we joked in part 1 as well.
Yeah.
And processed any of these feelings. And even now, like 50, 60 years later, into his rule as Baron, he's out here still constantly looking over his shoulder and worried that a guard captain or a literal family member will be the end of him.
Right. You know, I do want to give credit where credit is due, though.
Yeah.
Throughout this scene with Fade, we, through Baron's thoughts and then through Fade's thoughts, we do see how tremendously well Baron Harkonnen understands Feyd-Rautha, right?
Yeah.
Throughout the conversation, Baron is constantly, Fade will think quietly to himself, oh, fuck, I'm so fucked. And Baron will think, yeah, he thinks he's fucked. I'm going to let him think that for a minute. And, that's really neat. It's really cool to see that sort of insight.
It is.
We know he only survived because of Thufir Hawat warning him. But, hey, this is all Baron. This is all Baron cold reading his nephew. So much so, he literally responds out loud to one of Fade's thoughts, right?
Yeah, this is so cool.
Quote, "Get to the point, you old fool," Feyd-Rautha thought. "You think of me as an old fool," the Baron said. "I must dissuade you of that." End quote. Fucking baller move.
Yeah.
To just word for word pick it out of someone's brain. The poet who wrote that incredible, effusive sort of track on Baron Harkonnen had said that Vladimir had, quote, "voracious eyes, missing nothing, consuming you as they looked." And, we're seeing that in effect here.
We are.
Even in Baron's older years.
We are. You're so right. Credit where credit is due. We are focusing on some of Baron's negative qualities, but he's still out here the same Baron that's had an iron grip on power for decades.
Right. Yeah.
And you don't keep an iron grip on power for decades without being effective and being good at what you do. And you're right. We see that on display in how he completely twists this assassination into frankly, a W for him, into getting Feyd-Rautha to agree to this plan.
Yeah.
And promising Feyd-Rautha the throne.
It also occurs to me that we know of Baron's, the Dune Encyclopedia that tells us about how great the Baron was as a kid, is based on in-universe sources, right? Yes, it was written by a human, whatever, in 1983 or 2 or whatever. But I'm saying, in theory, everything from the Dune Encyclopedia is fallible because it comes from people in the universe.
Right.
Baron very well could have just killed all the people that were talking shit about him, Duke Leto cultivates this air of bravura, and as we meet him, we go, wow, what bravura, and then it's only through these moments with his son where we go, wow, he actually is tired and disillusioned and kind of cynical, and also willing to manipulate a native population of the planet for his own end. Baron is the other side of that coin, where we only see him as this monstrosity, this indomitable force of nature, of evil, and he's just as insecure and fucking floundering as a lot of people. And we see that through time with him in the same way we had time with Duke Leto.
Excellent point. Right.
The difference is, instead of murdering everybody who didn't buy into the bravura, Duke Leto just kind of lets him go.
Yeah.
Baron's nah, line him up.
Right. Duke Leto's got a great propaganda corps.
Yeah, it's true.
How will they know I lead them well if I don't tell them through my propaganda?
Yeah.
The Baron's got a secret police or something, He's got a bunch of hitmen on the payroll.
Yeah.
Who needs a propaganda corps when no one speaks up against you?
Just
and
kill
if they do,
everyone who does. Yeah. Easy.
Right. You send Liam Neeson after them, and no one's going to talk shit about you ever again.
He just has an office full of people with the gruff voices. I have a very specific skills. It's 80 guys who all sound like that. Incredible.
That's such a great point about the fallibility of the Dune Encyclopedia. It is a source, but it is a source where we always have to be skeptical about the narrator.
Yeah. Intentionally, it's an in-universe source to explain mistakes and issues. Yeah.
Totally. Okay, let's hone in on another of the Baron's, this is maybe his worst one, but another of the Baron's shortcomings, his ignorance on display here in the second half of Dune. How many times he just has no clue what's happening.
Right.
One of the first times we see this is this short conversation he has with Thufir. They're talking about Arrakis, they're talking about the Fremen, blah, blah, blah. And the Baron just brushes all of Thufir's data aside. Everything Thufir is telling him, he's like, no, don't worry about it. And in fact, he doubles down on his belief that the Fremen are just a couple of thousand desert dwellers.
Right.
whatever. They're not a real threat to my plans.
Yeah, sure.
Despite the data that Thufir is like presenting to him.
It's like, nah, how many fucking guys have you lost? And he's like, a bunch. Why? It's like, yeah.
Right.
God.
Like, do the math, Baron. I did the math.
Aren't you like smart or shit?
Right. But the Baron basically refuses to listen. In addition, in this scene, it's also clear to us as the reader that Thufir is still loyal to House Atreides and is sort of playing a double game. He's like a double agent here on the inside.
Right.
But it's not super apparent that the Baron is aware of this.
Right. Yeah.
Like, of course, the Baron doesn't fully trust Thufir Hawat. He never could. But that seems to me like a standard response for the Baron toward everyone. He's not going to fully trust anyone in his life, really.
Right. Right.
And so, to me at least, it feels like in this scene that the Baron is like unaware the extent to which Thufir is actively scheming against him, actively using Feyd-Rautha against him, and pitting Harkonnen against Harkonnen.
Right. Well, we also see Baron was completely out of the loop on this whole like gladiator gambit, right?
Right.
Which is nuts. Like Feyd kind of put stuff together because he talked to Thufir and that was like Thufir's plan. But Baron the whole time with that gladiator on Feyd's 17th birthday was like, oh, fuck, my nephew's going to die. Meanwhile, the whole thing is completely planned. It's it's nuts.
Ignorance. It's a tough look for our guy, the Baron.
Oh, facts. True. In fact, it's so true that let's talk about this final scene.
Oh, my
the
God.
Imperial audience chamber, because my lord, as he is berated by Shaddam IV, he's being caught off guard with a lot. So, questioned about the very, very populated southern polar regions that full of Fremen, just lots of Fremen down there. Baron is still like, no, those places, no, they're uninhabitable. Even though fucking Fenring, like 2 years ago, was like, you're serious? You think that?
Right.
All right, dude, whatever. And Baron's like, cool, I'm right.
Right. He doesn't think, oh, maybe I should look into this. Fenring seems concerned.
He told Fenring someone lied to you. Like, Hazimir Fenring has bad data.
Hilarious.
My guy. Don't doubt Fenring's facts. Dude knows what's going on all the time. It's kind of his whole thing.
Yeah.
This is also in the face of Shaddam literally telling him there are people living there, right? Shaddam's like, no, there are people there. Baron refuses to accept it. Quote, but that's impossible, the Baron protested.
It's impossible!
It's impossible! The worms, there's sand clear to the... These people seem able to avoid the worms, the Emperor said. End quote.
Oh my God.
Like, yeah, Baron, Jesus. If I was like, there are people living there, and he's like, there's tigers. It's like, then they avoid them. What?
Right. They figured it out?
God, Baron's so dumb in this scene.
Yeah. And again, a side of him that we really haven't seen up to this latter half of the Dune book.
Right, yeah.
Like, he's been so cunning and so on top of things, and his plan was so effective, and he won in the first half, and we know from his career that he's an astute politician and he's charming, charismatic. Like,
right.
We know all of these great things about him.
Yeah.
And to see how far he's fallen here, like fucking shaking in his boots in front of the Emperor.
Yeah.
It also gets worse for him because then the granddaughter he literally doesn't know he has marches in, and obviously shit's about to hit the fan. But this is also where Shaddam kind of realizes that the Baron's not pretending to be ignorant. Like, this isn't some sort of ploy from the Baron.
Yeah.
This dude may actually be clueless. Like, Shaddam literally says, quote, "Is it possible, Baron? Could you be as simple-minded as my truth-sayer suggests?"
Jesus.
End quote.
Oh, brutal.
Savage. Also, what did Mohaim whisper in his ear? Now I kind of like really want to know.
Yeah, what fucking crazy diss does she drop?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'd pay good money to know, you know. I'd sign up for that Shaddam the Fourth Patreon to get that bonus clip.
Especially because in Messiah, right, Moheim's out here like, that traitorous bitch. Like, Moheim's got a mouth on her. And
she does.
She has so much fun during this scene. I really think it would have some sass to it.
Yeah.
In a way that Shaddam just like poker faces through.
I agree.
He's like, you're a vulgar woman, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, we know she's from the South, you know?
Guys, Helen! Guys, Helen!
Guys, Helen Moheim!
Guys, you spreading words about that Sandman!
So all of this is to say that the Baron is a mess during this scene. And in a way, he's quite literally now become the antithesis of everything he aspired to be.
Right.
He aspired for power. He aspired for control. And here he is, this blubbering, afraid, powerless old man in front of the Emperor, faced with all of these truths that have been staring him in the face for decades, and he's been ignoring.
Yeah. Like, the word powerless is so key here because so much of Baron's plans toppling come down to the fact that he has no control at all. And I think this also keys into, we talk about these moments of ignorance. He doesn't know about the Fremen, right? He doesn't know that Thufir's still loyal to House Atreides. There are these like pointed moments of him not being aware. But even more broadly, he made the mistake that someone like Duke Leto never did. He saw the imperial structure. He saw this rat race of houses minor and houses major pitted against one another in these like petty feudal squabbles over decades, over millennia, over literally 10,000 years. And he looked at this 10,000 year Carino throne and at no point went, maybe they rigged the game. He worked so hard to politic his way to the imperial throne, right?
Right.
Bribes in every pocket, extra money donated to the Sardaukar, right?
Yeah.
Doing everything in his power to maintain this kind of like, ooh, I could one day be on the throne. But dude, House Carino stayed in charge by maintaining this status quo, right?
Yep.
They encouraged the houses minor and houses major to fucking battle it out. And anytime someone posed a real threat, like House Atreides, they would be murked.
Yeah.
Point is, the exact tools that Baron is using to try to build this house are rigged to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear that if he did at any point impress Shaddam with some amount of Solaris donated to the Sardaukar fund, none of that mattered, even remotely.
Right.
It's just, in some ways, I almost feel bad for Baron because
yeah.
It's so broken and he had no idea, even though he's in the heart of it, in the heat of it, every single day of his life. It's wild. Totally wild.
Yeah. Yeah. Although I am a little less sympathetic because he's not exactly out here doing all the right things.
No.
Plenty of blood on his hands.
Well, that's the thing, because the right thing, quote unquote, in the Imperium under House Carino is getting blood on your hands.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He's following the proper forms. None of it is commendable. None of it's like, hell yeah, Baron.
Right.
But he's like following the bloody rule book and totally punished for it because it is built on a lie. Ultimately.
Totally. That's such a great point. And ultimately, this is the scene where he meets his demise.
Right.
It all comes to a head, and he faces down Alia Atreides. And in his attempt to restrain her, instead he meets the Atreides Gom Jabbar.
Yes.
And so, in 10,193 AG, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen is killed. By none other than a family member, his granddaughter, Alia Harkonnen Atreides. What a life. What a way to come full circle in that way.
It took him a long time, but he finally failed that human test.
Yeah, he did indeed. So that covers the events of Dune leading up to the Baron's death. But this is a spoiler episode, and as we all know, this is not the end of the Baron. So after the break, we're actually going to get into the events of Children of Dune and talk about his little old possession of Alia, that little chapter in his quote-unquote life. So stick around for that.
Welcome back, everybody. Yes, let's get into Baron's return. Before we talk about Alia Atreides in Children of Dune and his return to our narrative, I did want to take a moment and let's talk about this sort of ironic victory for House Harkonnen in some ways.
Right.
Which is to say, recall that, like, more than anything else, Vladimir's ultimate goal was to put a Harkonnen on the throne, right? The imperial throne. He wanted a Harkonnen in control. Best case scenario himself, clearly, obviously. But it seems, based on his thought process in Dune, that he would actually be fine not being the Harkonnen on the throne, right?
Yeah.
We get this quote, and this is from the chapter with Nefud. Quote, "The Baron could see the path ahead of him. One day a Harkonnen would be emperor. Not himself, and no spawn of his loins, but a Harkonnen." End quote. Now, obviously, he goes on to say, "Fade Routha, yay!" But
yeah.
if we stopped it there, he's not wrong.
No.
The 10,000-year empire against all odds does topple to Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, a.k.a. grandchild of House Harkonnen.
Yeah.
In a way, Paul assuming the throne is a Harkonnen taking the throne, right?
Yeah. And look, Paul admits that he is as much Harkonnen as he is Atreides, right?
Right, yeah.
He gets that Harkonnen lineage through his mother and, in fact, reveals it to her. It's a huge bombshell moment in the first book, as we all know.
Right.
And in a twisted way, Paul, forcing Shaddam's hand, taking his uncreased Jordans, and assuming the role of emperor, fulfills the Baron's dream.
Right.
Of placing a Harkonnen, even one that's not him, on the throne.
Right.
And taking down Shaddam IV in like a weird, twisted, roundabout way that the Baron himself could have never predicted. But it is a great point that you bring up here, that in a twisted way, the Baron's dream also became a reality through Paul Atreides and through that lineage. It also just reveals how truly incestuous this fucking Imperium is. Everyone's related to everyone.
No kidding. Yeah, we missed the chapter, by the way, of Baron telling Nefud, "And one day a Harkonnen will wear the uncreased Jordans. I will have the throne and the shoes.
My drip will be on point.
I will have the nicest fit." Outfit of the day. You know, joking aside, I can't help but wonder at an alternative timeline where, you know, Paul reveals himself to Baron Harkonnen before he dies, saying, you know, "Yo, I am Harkonnen and Atreides."
Yeah.
Would Vladimir have felt a sense of satisfaction at the defeat of House Carino? Right?
Right.
And kind of answering that question, I think on one hand, like, anything is better than dying at the hands of a child. I suspect he would have attempted to kind of woo Paul Atreides, right?
I agree.
But this led me to think about kind of the heart of Dune's central themes that we see through the end of Children of Dune, with Leto and Ghanima talking about the golden path, right? This path to survival for humanity. And as Leto explains kind of towards the end of Children of Dune, it will take an empire of 4,000 years to kind of make it happen. Now, Baron, we kind of talked about last episode, as much as we condemn him, is in many ways representative of the type of person expected to excel within the Imperium. But his death and his failure, ultimately, shows us why Paul needed to overturn those ancient power structures, right? Why Leto talks about in Children of Dune how he's going to basically cripple the universe. That's what had to happen, because at the end of the day, Shaddam IV and House Carino as a whole was quietly a system of tyrants and tyranny, and was forcing this form of stagnation, which throughout all of the Dune books, stagnation as this ultimate ender of civilization remains the sort of one of the key themes in a lot of ways. And so, in sort of a poetic way, I see Baron's death and Paul's victory, getting those uncreased Air Jordans, as the literal beginning of the golden path even though it's going to be like 2 books until that phrase is used, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He symbolizes this old, corrupt form of government and rule that by the time of Leto 2, we learn is actively dangerous for humanity.
Right.
That idea of stagnation, as you've said. And so his death is symbolic in that way. It's a symbolic sort of severing of ties with the old ways and the old systems.
Yeah, exactly.
All of that having been said, though, he's not like dead.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Because as we all know in Children of Dune, he comes back, kind of, ish.
Yeah.
A big ish.
Yeah.
Amidst all of her inner voices, the Baron emerges as a savior for Alia Atreides, who at this time in her life is the regent of this galactic empire. And there's a lot to say about this. I mean, between what the Dune Encyclopedia tells us and Frank's own writings, it's worth sort of breaking down this possession a bit further.
Right.
Because there's the question of whether this is actually the Baron we all know and love come back in full, or is this some sort of mirror image? And then there's also, of course, the influence he exerts on her. So let's take some time to sort of explore this new Baron who emerges within Alia's other memory.
Yeah. And, to be clear, like, this is probably one of the most confusing things. And I've heard people complain about Children of Dune because they're like, the return of this villain. Are you kidding me? But it's not that simple. And ultimately, we learn a lot from Leto 2 and Paul's conversation within Leto 2 about the nature of abomination, right?
Right.
We know that Baron's possession of Alia is not a revival of the consciousness of this old man.
Yeah.
On the topic of how much the other memory are, they're kind of correlated people, humans, consciousnesses that have continued. Paul, via Leto 2, says the following, quote, "We live only through the reflection of your awareness. Your memory creates us." End quote.
Yeah.
And as we talked about in the Children of Dune book club, is that exactly perfectly clearly defined with a easy to rephrase way? Not really. No, it's kind of messy. But it is clear that this is not the same consciousness returned from death.
Right.
This is the way I see it is like a time-stamped recreation based on genetic information, and then specifically, and this is kind of the point that Paul gets to in that quote, reinforced by memory.
Yeah.
And even Baron, in his kind of seduction of Alia in that chapter where she kind of falls to his sales pitch, leverages that fact, right? He says, quote, "And I am dead while you are alive. I have only a fragile existence. I'm a mere memory self within you. I am yours to command." End quote. Now, is he selling himself short? Yes. Yup.
Right.
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's not this fucking simple, Baron.
Right.
God. It is worth noting that he's reinforcing that point. He's doubling down. He's saying, I'm not Baron Harkonnen. You don't have to be afraid of me. I died. You killed me.
Yeah.
I'm just a memory. I'm a memory that lives here, peaceful and harmless in your brain.
Right. Right. And what's interesting is the Dune Encyclopedia sort of explores this in a bit more detail.
Right.
And the thing it brings up is how Alia would remember the Baron.
Yeah.
Because Alia initially describes seeing him as she would remember him from her childhood. And the Dune Encyclopedia points out, well, this other memory Baron inside her knows things about her. He knows her tastes and her preferences.
Right.
And the Dune Encyclopedia posits that he actually wouldn't have looked like the sad old man, powerless Baron that we know from the end of the first book.
Right.
Here's a quote. Quote, "Probably Vladimir often presented himself in his prime, masculine, forceful, with a rich baritone voice, exquisitely coaxing, soothing, persuading by nuance, intonation, and inflection." End quote.
Yeah. So cool.
it is very cool to think like, oh, the Baron she's falling for is not like the disgusting, horrible Baron that we know from the first book. He's perhaps presenting this perfect version of himself back in his like 20s when he first took power and was at his best, at his prime.
Yeah.
And he's using that killer karaoke voice on her, you know?
Before you decide, let me sing you a song. She's like, what? Do you have a karaoke machine in my other memory? He's like, yes.
Right. And it doesn't even cost any quarters. It's free.
Oh my God. I want to be another memory.
So I know this is getting a little in the weeds, but it's still really interesting to think that the Baron that Alia quote unquote falls for or is like wooed by or is convinced by
right.
is not the actual Baron we all know and remember from the first book.
Right. Yeah.
It is an idealized version that he is presenting to this person who is already in a deeply vulnerable position.
Right.
And is ready to just accept any and all sort of help because she's just on the edge of literally losing her mind. So this young, strapping, forceful, confident young lad in your memory comes up and he's like, yo, I'm your grandpa. Let me help you.
Yeah.
That is suddenly way more convincing than the evil Baron approaches on his suspensors to help you.
Sure.
Two very different visuals. And this makes sense to me that what the Dune Encyclopedia is saying is that the other memory version of himself would actually be an idealized version.
Yeah. Also recall Alia's Fremen. So would she be persuaded by the sense pleasure? Like, Baron's a beautiful, thick boy, right? And he's proud of his physique as he's built it over 60 years.
Right.
But would Alia feel the same way about this, like, abandonment of self into sense pleasures, right?
Yeah.
Is that a quality that will impress the Fremen Alia? No, of course not, right?
Right.
So you're totally right. He's a politician, and he knows what kind of act to cultivate for her. And whether that literally is the clear vision of his, young self, or it's more just those qualities that he's eliciting, the Dune Encyclopedia brings all of that up to consider. It also does point out, like, we can never know how clearly visual the presentation is because we collectively have never been possessed. But
never mind.
Trial by possession.
Oh no!
I will swing you around a room. I just reread that chapter, is why it's like I totally missed that too. That Leto just spins her. Spins her like a cat.
I also reread that chapter. It gets so fucking anime. It's
wild. Well, back to the topic on hand. Let's talk about the Baron's sales pitch.
Yeah.
Because whatever he looked like, we hear what he says, right?
Mm-hmm.
And working on this script, I couldn't help but connect some of what he was saying to her to things we've heard from him before, right? So way back with Feyd-Rautha, shortly after the attempt on Baron's life, as we talked about earlier this episode, Baron says the following, quote, "You will cease these foolish attempts on my life, and I, when you are ready for it, will step aside in your favor. I will retire to an advisory position, leaving you in the seat of power." End quote. Feyd's like, fuck yeah,
okay.
That sounds great. Yeah. That sounds too good to be true.
Damn, Howie Mandel. Deal or no deal, I'm tempted.
Deal or no deal. Jumping forward, pitch to Alia, he says, quote, "In return, my darling granddaughter, I can serve you in many ways. I can advise you, help you with my counsel. You will be invincible within and without. You will sweep away all opposition. History will forget about your brother and cherish you. The future will be yours." End quote.
Damn. Howie Mandel. Deal or no deal.
He's making it sound like a solid deal.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, listen, he's a charismatic people person. Clearly, he's flexing those muscles. And as you pointed out, Alia, in this incredibly vulnerable state, of course, reasonably takes the deal. But it struck me that in both cases, he's saying, yeah, no, I'll step aside. I don't want to be in the driver's seat. In fact, that's not even my goal. My goal is your success.
Yeah.
My goal is to just advise and be as helpful as I can. And we don't see how that would have worked out with Fade. Like maybe he would have ruled through Fade, or maybe he would have worked to make Fade more pliable to his whims and not an independent ruler.
Yeah.
He died, so we have no idea what that would look like. But with Alia, clearly we see this as an instance of him like sugarcoating to the point of almost literally lying. Personally seeking power and influence however he can get it. Because that's, at the end of the day, does seem to be one of those characteristic genetic qualities of the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen.
True. And while we don't see how he would have ruled with Fade, we do see the effect he has on Alia throughout Children of Dune. And it's profound. The Baron's influence completely changes Alia, brings out maybe the worst instincts within her.
Yeah.
She becomes, throughout the story, more paranoid, more distrustful, more controlling, and more ignorant of the truth of events happening around her.
Wait, has she read our script talking about the Baron's primary qualities?
Right? Does that not sound familiar?
Yeah.
So much of the Baron is imprinting itself on Alia, or so much of the Baron's qualities, the good and bad within him, are being brought out within Alia herself. I mean, writing this script, I was just like, holy shit. Alia, literally in Children of Dune, tries to murder her mother.
Yo.
Does that remind you of anyone?
That's such a good point. That's great.
Muertana!
Yeah.
How did the Baron rise to power at that fateful banquet?
That's...
by murdering his mother.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, that's so cool. I love it.
The parallels, the echoes. Here he is, making Alia do the same types of things that he would have, and in fact, that he did in his life. And this, like, symmetry, this poetry continues, because by the time we reach the end of Children of Dune, Baron's downfall is once again brought about at the hands of Alia Atreides.
Right.
Who, in just like a gut-wrenching, tragic scene, leaps from the window of the keep. Quote, "Now the voice of the old Baron raged from her lips. 'Stop! Stop it, I say! I command you! Stop it! Feel this!' Alia clutched her head, stumbled closer to the window." End quote.
Yeah.
In her final moments, he is desperately doing everything he can to take control of her body. The other voices within her are exploding out of her.
Yeah, yeah.
And to silence it once and for all, she leaps from that window.
He even says, "I have a plan." He's like, "No, I have a plan. I can fix this. Yo, I got a plan."
Right.
Don't...
Right.
You know, and literally as a reader, I'm like, oh, maybe you should hear him out. Falling into his fucking bullshit again myself as the reader.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild.
To his final breath, the Baron was out here scheming, plotting, twisting people, manipulating, trying to control everything he could. And the symmetry within him, this like consistency across his character, across these books, a testament to Frank's writing, a testament to how well Frank knew these characters that he wrote so deeply.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's incredible. And you know, eventually everything comes full circle and the Baron once again, and for the final time this time, is removed from the story by Alia Atreides, by a choice made by Alia Atreides.
Not to mention, he's screaming up to the point where she throws herself from the window.
Yeah.
And then it describes her falling in silence.
Heartbreaking stuff.
Yeah. Alia makes the choice to throw herself from the window, but she also maintains control to her final moment.
Yeah.
And I would like to think dies as Alia Atreides, not as the abomination.
Indeed. Indeed.
Get fucked, Baron. Idiot. Well, on that unceremonious note, we do want to wrap up with this thought from the Dune Encyclopedia, which summarizes Vladimir's ultimate struggle with House Atreides. I think it's just lovely, kind of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Quote, "Vladimir was an anomaly, a figure whose career lasted longer than his life. His ghost realized his great desire to put a Harkonnen under his influence, Alia, on the imperial throne. But in death, as in life, the Atreides continued to foil him. End quote.
Beautiful.
My dude managed to work longer than he lived, hashtag the grind, and he managed to be effectively murdered by the same woman twice.
Hashtag love life.
Hashtag we out here not getting matches on Tinder. It's fine. Fear and power, power and fear. Get fucked, Baron.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
The Dune Encyclopedia, man. I know I've said it before, but I really want the Dune Encyclopedia to write my eulogy once I'm gone.
Yeah.
They'll summarize my entire life in a beautiful one paragraph, you know?
Right. Abu was an anomaly. Person who worked more hours than he was awake, somehow. And his ghost is finally playing as many video games as he wants to.
I can't wait. I can't wait to be that ghost. All right, let's wrap up today's conversation in today's episode, Leo.
Sure.
On a question, as we like to do. I'm curious, after our 2-part discussion now of Vladimir Harkonnen, after taking into consideration his whole life and the events of Dune, the events of Children of Dune, what do you think his lasting legacy was? What was the legacy of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, both in universe, sort of for the Imperium, for the galaxy, for those characters, but also stepping out of it on a meta level for us as the reader?
Okay. I think on an individual basis, like in universe, I think he's an example of someone people remembered as probably this kind of merciless, ambition-driven ruler who got out of the universe what he put into it, which is to say he was dealing out, death and violence as repercussions for overreaching ambition for everybody, right? Like Piter had ambitions for himself. Baron was going to reward that with death. Well, Baron, you get out what you put in. I see him as emblematic of that. But in a more meta sense, and even still in universe, I think he really represents the old ways, as we've talked about somewhat on this episode so far, right?
Yeah.
Without saying too much, because again, we're only talking about through the end of Children of Dune, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen's story ends here. That's why you're not going to see a part 3 of Baron Harkonnen on our feed. He is occasionally referenced in future books, but his direct involvement is done. And generally, he's referenced as emblematic of the old power structures, like the Bene Gesserit, like the Guild having this kind of chokehold on the galaxy, like House Carino and their 10,000-year rule. In so many ways, he himself alone doesn't really mean a lot. I mean, he is just one of these pieces of these ancient power structures that ultimately had to be overthrown for humanity to move forward. And what does that mean? Post Children of Dune, you'll have to read and find out. But ultimately, that's where my thoughts lie. He's this representative of the old ways, of the old means to success, and I think that's about where his legacy ends. But what about you? What do you see as Baron's kind of lasting legacy in the galaxy?
I actually completely agree with you. I think you nailed it on the head. Like, to me, the Baron died as he lived, and he serves as this ultimate warning against ambition, against greed, against chasing power for power's sake. And in the end, look where he ended up. House Harkonnen is basically irrelevant by the time of Children of Dune. Like, nobody out here is worried about House Harkonnen, and he really just ends up as nothing but a memory. In Children of Dune, sure, he's like a bit more of an active memory, but as you've said, like, by the time we get into the later books in the Dune saga, he does not play an active role. He's mentioned a couple of times, but he is nothing but this fading memory of this once powerful duke who succumbed to his worst instinct. So I think he really truly embodies this like warning against everything that he stood for.
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me of that very popular quote from Westworld.
Oh.
These violent delights have violent ends.
Oh my God. Yeah.
That to me is the Baron.
So would he like be the Baron in the black hat? Or like what? Yo, Baron would fucking love Westworld. Are you kidding me? Oh my God.
That would be his jam.
I can have sex with everything. They're like, yeah, that's like most of why we made this place. He's like, this is sick.
He'd love it. He'd love it.
Stealing other people's shoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of the uncreased shoes are mine.
Damn, speaking of violent delights, all of the uncreased
Everyone,
shoes, all of
make
them?
me a chair out of them. Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at @lore_party. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the golden path.
Knows things about her. He knows her tastes and her preferences. And, how many times she's banged Duncan, Idaho. Like, he knows about her sex life, apparently.
I've counted.
I've kept a tally.
It's like 92.